4 years ago, I started a new chapter in my life. I began working towards a health journey and rewriting the version of myself I had always known. I had to rewrite my identity. This year at the Keto Orland Summit 2022, I was able to share that story, that thought process, and how rewriting who I was changed my life.
Thank you, Judith. Oh my gosh. Guys, I am so excited to be here. If you know me, you know excitement is like my middle name. I'm going to say it a lot. I'm going to say it too much. I'm going to use lots of verbs like amazing and phenomenal because that's how I feel all the time thanks to this lifestyle. But it is going to be a fantastic weekend. It's Thursday night, y'all. It's the kickoff. We're here. We made it. And I bet some of you have some stories on making it here today. I bet there were flights that were canceled and things you had to figure out, and spouses who may not have gotten it when you decided to get in that Uber and make your way to the airport. But you're here. The story started for what this weekend is going to do in the lives of the people who decided to invest in themselves and show up. And that's what a lot of this lifestyle is. That is a lot of what we do here, is we show up. We show up when it's hard. We show up when it's overwhelming. We show up when we're stressed out. And I think that when we see the stories of what people accomplish here, that's what makes it so fun. That's what makes it riveting. That's what gets us out of our seats, cheering up on our feet when we see somebody win here, because the story is so good. And I was taking a look at these speakers, and I got to say first and foremost, thank you, Judith, and thank you, Erica, for including me in this phenomenal weekend. It's amazing to be here. It's amazing to know that I get to share the stage with a level of speakers that are going to show up this weekend. I know there's people flying in still, there's people coming from all over, but when you look at that lineup, you may have felt a little bit like I did, like all of them here in one spot, and they're all willing to share and come together and be who they need to be. They're going to do what they do best to invest in each and every one of you this weekend. But it took the investment of yourself first. It took you saying yes. It took you showing up. It took you getting the ticket. It took you doing the hard things to get here first so you could be fed and fueled by the people who do what they do. And I took a look at that flyer, and it started circulating the internet, and I saw my little face sandwiched in between the doctors and the physicians and the nutritionists and the coaches and the people who are out there impacting people by the thousands. And I went, I think I need to ask myself, what's my role here? What's my part? And as I think about the women who chose to let me be part of something, I wanted to do it right. I wanted to do it justice. And I really had to dig in and say, amongst the experts, amongst the best of the best, who am I this weekend for you all? How can I serve this group of people who invested in themselves? And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Mary Daniels, and I'm what you would consider a keto enthusiast. I'm a keto story. And I think that that's kind of my part here. I love a good story. I love sharing what people do when it gets tough. I love hearing about the overcomers. I'm one of those people that's moved to tears by films. That music gets in me and it fills my soul, and I'm moved by the end of it because of the story, because of the overarching thing of what gets done. And I thought about really all I am here in this keto community is I'm a mom and a wife and a woman who at home decided to do something about mine. I decided to rewrite my identity. And I want to share a little bit of that first, but really today is about sharing the stories of the movers and shakers. And that I get to be in this community somebody who shares and amplifies and gives volume and a voice to the phenomenal keto stories that are happening in the quiet, behind closed doors, at home, when you're alone and it's the hardest, when nobody else is supporting you, when you have to choose foods that you don't understand, when you're Googling the questions that Autumn just helped answer. For the average person who's willing to do something unaverage so they can start to have a life that they've never had. They're willing to do the things they've never been able to do in order to have results they've never been able to experience. And that's what happened with me. In 2018, I was a mom of 3. I gotta look at my husband on that one. We got a whole lot of kids. I have 5 kids, 9 and under. I was a mama of 3 in 2018, and I have been overweight my entire life. I've been heavy always. I looked at pictures this last week when I took my girls up to my mama's, and I looked at pictures, everything from 4, 5, 6. I was a chubby kid always. That was part of my identity. I loved hearing Autumn speak today because I think about those family portraits with me, with all my siblings. I come from a big family and going, what was different there? Because I didn't fit in. When I look at those pictures, I noticed something there that makes me feel like I was always a little bit different. And part of that was that my weight was something that was up for discussion. As a child, my body was up for people to discuss around the dinner table. What was on my plate, whether or not I went back for seconds. And so I spent 20 years of my life, 20 plus years of my life, I'm getting old, y'all. I gotta do this math up here. I don't math and arithmetic like Autumn does. 20 plus years of my life overweight, chubby. And then it went from overweight to full-figured, and then it went from full-figured to obese. And I was able to tell myself for a long time I was healthy fat. I didn't have any problems, I didn't have any side effects, I was just full and thick, and I rocked it. I didn't let it stop me from shopping. I just could only shop certain places. Didn't let it from stop me, getting my hair and makeup together. I just had a little more face to cover. Like, it was just one of those things that I had learned to kind of embrace it, or so I thought. And I didn't realize how much I was hiding from it. In 2018, I went into the doctor because for the last couple of years since my second daughter was born, I was living half my life in bed. I was in my bed 2 weeks of every month. I had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, costochondritis, sleep apnea, depression, anxiety. I was on medication after medication. Each one of those led to the need for another medication. I would get a prescription, all of a sudden the side effects led to a lack of sleep, and then I'm on Ambien. The Ambien made me tired, and all of a sudden they're like, maybe your ADHD needs to be amped up a little bit, let's up your Adderall. And all of a sudden, thing after thing after thing led to a cascade failure, and it was the first time that I had to face down at that doctor's appointment that I wasn't healthy fat. I was struggling, I was unhealthy, I was hurting, I was in a battle with my body. I had gotten to the point that I despised and hated my love of food. I thought food was the bad guy. Food was the problem. If I could just hate food, if I could just learn to not be in love with eating, then maybe everything could be fixed. If I could just take one of those pills that made everything taste like crap, then maybe I could get through this. I didn't know that food could be my ally. I didn't know food could be my freedom. It was the bad guy. It was the thing I was up against. I was at the point I was bitter with the body that I was living in. And I didn't look at it as the one and only vessel that carries me through this one and beautiful life that I get to have each and every day. For some reason, I thought maybe I got to turn it in for a newer model at some point. That at some point I would get the opportunity to not be at war with this anymore, instead of embracing the only one I was given and experience each and every day in it. I had to stop hating it and learn that it was the thing that was going to carry me tomorrow. It was the thing that was going to carry me through the memories and the experiences and the moments with this man that I love and those babies that I had. And all of a sudden, I walked out of the doctor's office with a prescription for pre-diabetes medicine, metformin in one hand, and a consultation packet for weight loss surgery in the other. And my doctor said, this is the next step, this is where we're at. And so I walked out of the doctor's office within minutes. Within minutes, I started getting call after call after call after call for VSG, and I don't even know the names of them all. And weight loss consultation after weight loss consultation, anywhere within 100 miles of Kansas City. I was on their list. I had made their list in that moment when I walked out the doctor's office, and I broke into tears. I called my sister. She's 10 years older than me. She's one of my very best friends. She's a phenomenal woman, and she had to speak some truth into my life. But I was ready for it. And I want to say that one more time. She had to speak some truth into my life, but I was at the moment I was ready for it. 2 years before, 2 weeks before, 2 days before, I wasn't ready to change my story yet. I wasn't ready to rewrite my identity yet. But in that moment, I was the brokenest I had ever been, and at that moment, someone came through, and that's when everything changed. And she said, Mary, you're addicted to sugar, and you're addicted to carbs. You may think you have done everything under the sun, every shake, every powder, everything that I could have done to try and lose weight. I was 10 years old weighing myself in front of 40-year-old housewives in the middle of the day at Weight Watchers, thinking that that was going to be the answer. I had done thing after thing after thing after thing, but I had never given up the things that controlled me. Woo! Not once. And so she said, you've never done anything long enough where you actually, I made brownies work on Weight Watchers. I was that person. I would rather not eat real food and get the brownie. Like that, I was gonna make those work for me. For those of you who know a little about who I am and how I live my life, I make it work. If I want something enough, I'm gonna go ahead and figure out a way to make that happen, and that's what I did. And she said, you can't play that game here anymore. Not with your health. And she said, you're addicted to sugar and carbs, and the next day I gave them up cold turkey. First time in my entire life. First time, I was sicker than a dog. I didn't have a name for it. Keto was not something that was on my radar. I could not have Googled it at that point, because I just went, I guess no more sugar, no more carbs. 2 weeks later, I'm on vacation with my husband celebrating our 7-year anniversary, and I was in the hotel room sick the entire time. the congestion, the stuffiness, etc. But I plowed through it. And I think all the time, I ask myself questions all the time about how my story got to where it got to. What in those moments when I was writing those chapters of my life really did the thing? And I can't answer the question of why, for whatever reason, I plowed through the discomfort. And I plowed through the keto flu, or whatever we want to call it. And I took a look at that point in my life, in that moment, and I got through the other side, and within 6 months, I lost 40 pounds. Within 9 months, I lost 60. And I went on a trip with my spouse, came home pregnant with keto twins. Be careful, those hormones start to work, y'all, be careful. So they didn't know I had, I was 3 ultrasounds in, and they went, there's 2. So that changed some things a little bit. I got pregnant with keto twins, had those keto babies, walked out of the doctor's office after delivering, left that ICU, exactly at the starting weight I had weighed in at the doctor the day I had the pre-diabetes prescription. And it hurt. Oh, it hurt. It hurt just to have to start over. It hurt to take a look at where my body was and said I never wanted to see that number again. But within a few minutes I went, but I've done it. I've done it once. I know how to do it. I know I can make this happen. I know I've seen that number, but I've seen a whole bunch lower, 60 pounds down. I know I can do it again. And then in the next 13 months, when the babies turned 3 months old, I started keto back up. And in 13 months, I lost over 125 pounds. It's a good story, y'all. It's a good one. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. I say that to say that is why I'm here. That's why these ladies allowed me to come to this stage, is because stories have a place here. You don't have to be a doctor and know everything. You don't have to be a nutritionist. You don't need any letters behind your name to make an impact in this community. The stories are worth sharing. The stories are worth telling. And that's why I'm on the stage today. That's the answer I came up with when I kind of took a look at that flyer and went, we're in good company here. This is a good group of people. What's my part? And I'm a storyteller. I'm a story sharer. I love to take a look at what people have done and what they've overcome. I love to be in those winning moments. I love to see them win and stand mountaintop and shout from the rooftops that they've made it. I love it. But I love to know what they went through in the valleys. I like to be there when it's the darkest, when it's hard. And I like to know what they went through, how they overcame, what the process was to create a championship mindset in the moment you were losing. That's what the majority of people here are doing. They're rewriting their story. They're writing a chapter in their life that they could not have imagined at the beginning. That 10 chapters ago, when they were losing, when they were failing, when it was the hardest, when I was in bed with those babies trying to homeschool from my king-size bed and had them sitting on the comforter, and there were no field trips, and there was no adventure, there were no mountain climbing, it was everything I could do to survive the day. I could not have expected the chapters that came next, but I also couldn't have expected them to show up without taking the pen in my hand. I had to write it. I had to do what was next. And I think that that's where it gets so good. So because of this community, I started sharing a little bit about how this process looked. I got on Instagram against my, like, everything in me. I needed something else to do with 5 babies at home, like a hole in the head, I'm just going to say. It's social media, like I did not need that in my life until I knew I needed it in my life. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I logged into Instagram, I started sharing that story. Had about 63 pounds of weight loss. And I started just saying, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm unpacking. This is what I'm going through. These are the things that I had to realize affected me in a way that I didn't realize that they did. I had to be willing to say, this is the hard stuff about losing weight and having excess skin. About all of a sudden thinking that if I lost the weight, I would somehow be, the world's perspective and their value of what beauty is, but my stretch marks are still here. The dimples are still there. The cellulite still remains. That I might be thinner, I might be skinnier, I might be all the things that I always thought would make the mark, would hit the ticket for me to feel like the person I deserve to be, but I realized I had to write that person first. I had to put her out on the horizon. I had to be willing to say, this is where I'm going, and say yes to anything and everything that could get me closer to that version of me, and no to anything that would hold me back. No to anything that would sidetrack me. But I had to know who she was. Because when I showed up, and when I got to meet the future version of me, I had to be able to recognize her. And if I hadn't been willing to say where I wanted to go and write that next chapter, those next 10, it was hard. Those 10 chapters were hard. I couldn't have recognized when I got there, or been willing to be purposeful in the acknowledgement of the story it took to get there. I was results focused for a long time. It was always about the end goal. I love how Autumn described that. She's like, you think you're going from here to here, and that's when you stop. I didn't appreciate and fall in love with the journey until I started sharing what it was doing for me, and I realized that it was connecting with people. It was changing their stories. And so I went from Instagram to a little app called Clubhouse. Little black and white icon on my phone. And I found something I didn't know I was looking for. The stories that would change people. The people that were home in lockdown, alone, sharing the struggles of what they were doing to get the next chapter written. The things that were hard, the things that they were overcoming. And I fell in love with getting the opportunity to set a stage to host a space where people could come share their keto stories. All of a sudden, it led to me telling my husband that we needed to pack up those 5 kids, buy an RV, and travel the country, and go around and interview our friends in real life, sit down at their kitchen table, sit down with their babies and their children, and ask how their mommy giving up some sugar allowed them to have a new mommy. Sit down and ask the questions of what was it that you had to let go of? What is it that you had to lose? What is it that you had to give up to have all the gains you've gotten in your life? And tell me about the gains. And we've fallen in love with it. We turned our whole brand from my weight loss story to Keto Life on Tour and started touring and sharing and falling in love with and sitting on the doorsteps and the front porches of our keto friends all over the country. And it's been phenomenal. And those stories and storytelling and falling in love with the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys, the hard stuff, is the thing that I kind of want to be able to touch on today. And I'm going to go into a little bit of a story. And it's not a keto story. I think that that's one of the things that makes it really fun is that anything and everything that comes into my life, I find myself walking through and working through the lessons. How is it that that film applies to the thing that we just did here? How is it that that song changes the way I think about the world? Over a decade ago, 10 years ago plus. I mean, this is that math again. Look at how old am I? Over 10 years ago, I was at a conference similar to this. I was sitting in the chairs, and I had signed up, and I had flown in, and I had invested in the ticket, and I had, the bad Uber driver, and the nanny that cancels, and all the things that go along that kind of try and get us off track when we decide to do something big. Have you ever noticed that? That when you decide you're going to do something great, that you're going to commit to something, you're going to do something big, something comes along and it hammers you a little bit. It beats the dog meat out of you just a little bit, just to make sure you're committed. And I remember that feeling in that conference 10 years ago. I had showed up and it was a business and entrepreneurship conference. And for those of you who don't know me, that's my first hat. Man, I love small business. I love entrepreneurs. I love the idea that we can get time and money free and write the story of our lives that we want in every single area. And so I invested in myself, showed up that weekend, and the speaker from stage shared the story. And I want to share it with you today. Hey, because it's kind of fun. It's a Florida story. It's a seafaring story. It's got pirates and treasure long forgotten. I mean, all the good stuff that makes a story so good. But I was sitting there, and I was thinking about how it has changed my paradigm. I bet from that conference, I learned a whole lot about taxes and write-offs and, pricing, and I learned all sorts of stuff about business ownership. But I took this story with me, and I've carried it with me for a decade. It's changed the way I've seen the world. And so the speaker up on stage, he talked about being in Florida, going down Key West. And here in this beautiful sunny state is a little museum that's a hole in the wall called Mel Fisher's Treasure Museum. All right, I see a couple nodding heads. I love that. I see a couple people who know where this is going. You know where this is going. So there's this little hole in the wall, Mel Fisher's Treasure Museum. And if you were to go see that this week while you're here, before you walk in the door, up above it on the outside on a placard, it says, "Today's the day." And anybody who's worked with me, anybody who I've gotten the opportunity to coach you with on your business, that I've gotten the opportunity to talk to you about your mindset, the things that I do behind closed doors on, from Zoom all over the country with some of the best business owners on the planet. Any of you who have worked with me, you've heard me say, today's the day. Today's the day! And I've said it over and over and over again, but it has a lot of context. It has a whole story behind it. In my early 20s, I heard this story, and still, each and every day, I have to pull it out of me, and that's what makes it so good. So if you were to go to Mel Fisher's Treasure Museum, you'd learn a little bit more about who this guy was. He was a World War II veteran. He was in the scuba diving outfit there, and he helped to kind of set the stage and the tone and create scuba as a real sport in the United States. And so he was living in Southern California after the war, married a beautiful woman, had his bride, started making babies, and opened a little scuba dive shop in Southern California. He certified some 65,000 scuba people over the course of a number of years, all sorts of neat stuff. In Southern California, he started kind of doing some of these dives on sunken ships. He kind of started leading them. He found them, mapped them out, and started leading other people on these dives of these ships, and kind of fell in love with it. He brought up some cannon one day, and then the historians told him it was actually just sewage pipes, but he was excited about it. It was going to be cool. And so he started saving up his money after his business started to kind of do some things, and started taking some trips to Southern Florida. And he found out about a whole area in Southern Florida that they called at the time the Treasure Coast. So in the 1600s, 1700s, even into the 1800s, all the world powers would go to Latin America, South America, and rob them of all their riches. The Colombian emeralds, the gold from the Aztecs, just filled these ships. And Spain was kind of the superpower for about 300 of those years. And what they would do is they would go around the southern part of Florida, and pirates would be waiting. And the pirates would feast on what they would call these galleons. These galleons were these ships carrying these incredible treasures. And the pirates would wait, and when the ships would come through, they would attack them and steal everything they could before they sank. And so at this time in history, there was billions, with a B, billions of dollars worth of treasure on the ocean floor here in Southern Florida. And so he started taking these trips, and he comes home with a book. And what this book was it was a list of the manifests of these ships that had sunk, and how much treasure supposedly were on them. And so him and his buddy were looking at this book, and they came across a ship called the Nuestra Senora de Atocha. Some of y'all, I'm looking at you, Ada, can help me with that later. I didn't have time to ask to make sure I did that right. It's probably wrong. But the Atocha was in this particular book, and it was supposed to be one of the richest treasure ships of all time. So on September 4th, 1622, it took off from Havana, Cuba, and it was with 28 other ships. It was supposed to keep it safe from the pirates. But the next day, a hurricane hit, and it, along with 7 other ships in that fleet, went down in the Florida Straits. The next day, they found the 110-foot by 30-foot hull, 55 feet underwater with nothing but 10 feet of the mast sticking up, and 5 survivors clinging on there for their lives, cold and scared and exhausted. And they were able to rescue them, and they told them of the treasures that were on this ship. They go back the next day, and there's no finding it. For almost 4 centuries, all attempts to find the Atocha failed. The treasure was spread across 10 miles of ocean floor and was spread out. And this guy reads this story with his buddy in a book, and based on this story, I just want to reiterate that right now. Based on this story, he packs up his bride, his kids, sells his shop, sells his little studio where he's making these scuba videos, convinces a whole bunch of his friends and his family to sell everything they own. And in the 60s, pack up their cars and drive from California to Florida in search of a sunken treasure. Y'all think some of your in-laws think you're crazy for coming here this weekend. You've got some negative spouses that say what you're doing is nuts, flying down to Florida to learn something about some food on your plates. This guy gets all the way to Florida, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the pirates. I don't know if it's the treasure. I don't know if it's just the unabashed belief in something that no one's ever seen. I remember that feeling, the unabashed belief that I had never seen this, but it was there. That I had never found this treasure, but it was down there something. I don't know what it is that made me fall in love with this story. But he moves to Southern Florida. He starts to go out on these boats every day. And Mel Fisher's line, the reason that placard was there is every single day when they would get on these boats to go out and search for this treasure, he'd say, "Today's the day! Today's the day!" And they said he was obnoxious, and he was loud, and he was always fired up. And they couldn't believe that he could have that much energy each and every morning. But he said, "Today's the day." And they would go out on these boats. 2 years spot. We're looking at everything. I think that you've been looking in this wrong spot for 2 years. Every day, today's the day. 24 months, today's the day. And I just remember at the beginning of some of my health journeys, the days that I thought that I was committed to something, the amount of times that I spent out on the water, thinking I was going to find something, thinking the treasure was there, and I was in the wrong spot. Autumn talked about it. I was thought that cutting calories was going to be enough. That movement was going to be enough. That the shake was going to do it. That the stuff I sprinkled on my food would make me hit. I remember committing to showing up. To going up against the tides and the currents. And going up against the things that were hard. Fighting the ocean. And realizing I was in the wrong spot altogether. There was no treasure where I was searching there.
Come on, Mary.
And so he switches it up. And then he searches for in 3 of the wrong spots there. And he finally, at the 3-year mark, finds an anchor. A huge anchor. 14-foot anchor. Big. It had all sorts of little symbols on it that they believed it was from the Etosha. 2 days later, they found a gold chain. 3 days later after that, they found 2 gold bars worth thousands of dollars. And finally, he kind of went, I think there might be something here. There might be something to this. Then the government showed up. I love that I got that reaction here. I wasn't sure in Florida. The government showed up and they said, you're doing such a good job. We want to slow you down. So they went ahead and confiscated that. They said, you are welcome to continue hunting treasure, but we're going to put government agents on all your boats. You're going to pay their insurance. You're going to pay their expenses. You're going to have to only work them 8 hours a day. They can't work the way you work, and you've got to change some of these working conditions. They're just not up to snuff for our government agents. You're doing such a good job. Let us make sure you do it our way. So he did. He started taking these agents out each and every single day. They started zipping all around the ocean. And at the 5-year mark, he found 2 silver bars. That's all he found in that whole time. That, little trinkets and treasures from other ships, but nothing that was from the Etosha. And so they came along and they said, okay, it was thank you for these. The governor of Florida showed up alongside the federal government, and they took these 3 silver bars and they flipped them the bird while they drove away on the boat, carrying the next part of the treasure he found. And I'm just thinking, 5 years in, it's probably a little bit hard to say today's the day. 5 years in, every time you start to make something happen, it kind of seems to slip backwards. Every time you get those 3 feet forward, 2 go backwards. Every time you think that you're kind of making some progress, and he just kept going and saying, today's the day, because he knew there was a chance. There was a chance. He was hungry for it. And I think of why I stuck with some things when I started this keto journey in 2018. I kind of think about the days that we hit those stalls and those plateaus, and all of a sudden I realized I was drinking a McDonald's iced coffee every morning, and there are 30 carbs in that mamma jamma because it is a mix. That's not coffee at all. All these things that I did that I made go, man, every time I feel like I've got it figured out, I learned something else that makes me feel like I'm not quite there. Every time I kind of get a little bit of traction, every time I think something's kind of happening, I take a few steps back and I'm reminded that I don't know what I don't know yet. And I think of Mel when he was doing all that and what he was willing to go through. The press started saying he was a charlatan. He was fake. He was a scam artist. His competitors started coming down to Florida and chasing his boats around, trying to figure out where he was going, trying to steal his treasure. They said publicly what he was doing couldn't be real. They said out loud that what he was doing wasn't the real deal, that it couldn't possibly be the Etosha. No one had ever found it. And I think of some of the keto OGs. I'm going to say it that way. Some of the people in the beginning of this journey who knew there was treasure before any of us had ever read the story. Some of the people who were willing to dig and to deal with the critics and to deal with the press and to deal with the negativity so that you and I could get a map to the treasure instead of asking if it was real. They helped set the stage and the tone to make it real. And they did the hard work. And they lost medical practices. And they were written up in the news as scam artists. And despite the fact that they were experts with the letters behind their names, they were told they couldn't possibly know what they knew because this isn't a real diet. This isn't a real lifestyle. It has to cost money. There has to be drop shipping. You have to have something delivered to your door. It has to come out of a canister. You couldn't possibly do this with real food. I bet their nutritionist sister who had the letters behind their names didn't think that it was a good idea to increase their fats. I have a feeling that a few people who were trying to sell whatever version of rubber eyelashes was in the health industry at that point said, he's like, it's not this, it's this. Look over here. We've got one too. And all of a sudden, all the competitors started saying, oh, no, this is that too. They slapped those keto labels on there and said, no, that's us too. Not caring if there were seed oils or cane sugar or any of the other things. The charlatans showed up to call out the people that were doing the work to find the treasure and let them know that what they were doing wasn't worthwhile, and they kept digging anyways. There was a whole bunch of people in this industry. They kept researching anyway. They kept fasting anyway. And that's where it gets kind of cool. There's treasures in the hearts of the average person that they knew could come out, and all of a sudden they stopped writing prescriptions and they were a charlatan. 5 years. 5 years! Today's the day. Today's the day. The government of Florida decides to cancel his lease. They said only government workers from now on can go out and hunt treasure. They had 12 in the world. And they canceled the leases of treasure hunters all over. Every single day, Mel had to say, today's the day! And he couldn't even get on his boat. I know a couple of you have done things like had to have surgery during this journey. You've had to stop everything. You've experienced a loss. You've had turmoil. You've had something that kept you from getting in the boat that day. And it was hard to say, I'm in it. I'm in it. Today's the day. I'm going to have results. You knew it wasn't. But he kept on keeping on, and he fought the lawsuit. He got his lease back. He got back out on that water. He had to sell everything, moved his family onto a dilapidated houseboat that he tied up in Key West. He had a bunch of kids at that point. He put a boat next to it, the Golden Doubloon. The Golden Doubloon was his little museum of all the little treasures and trinkets he had found so far. Everything the government hadn't taken at that point. And the Golden Doubloon also doubled as his office. And it was parked next to him in the little slip in Key West. And one day it just sank, rolled over, tipped over, was done for. And Mel Fisher had to go down and re-get the treasure. Dive again for the treasure he'd already had. And that's that moment when I was at the hospital and I got to find this treasure again. I already did the work once. Is it supposed to stick with me? And he went down and he did it again. He comes up and it had doubled as his office. All of his paperwork, everything he had, all the back end of his business was in that Golden Doubloon. And the SEC showed up. And they said, we want to take a look at what you're doing in the stocks you're selling. He goes, good luck. Here's the papers. They're still drying out on the boat. Like, here, do what you can. And they shut him down. At that point, he had millions of dollars with the United States government. He ended the season of 1973 broke with a sunken houseboat, living on an abandoned, dilapidated houseboat with his kids. Everything he'd already found was with the government. And the world thought he was a crook. If I told you that story and I ended there, let's take a look at our time. If I ended there, would that story be worth telling? If I said Mel Fisher found an anchor, a gold chain, 2 gold bars, and 3 silver bars, and had it all taken away, and he was a disaster and he was broke, would it be worth sharing? I want you to ask yourself that right now if you're in a season where you're the brokest. I want you to ask yourself that right now. If you're in a season where you keep saying today's the day and you can't get out on the boat. I want you to ask yourself if your story in this journey is worth sharing yet. Because it doesn't mean that it's over. It means we've got to keep writing. So that's what he did. He fights the lawsuit again. He gets back out on the water. And his whole family's grown by this point. He's got all his kids in it. And his son, in the middle of the night, where they're searching for treasure, they thought they had finally found something. His boat turns over in the night and he dies. And I can only imagine how hard it was for Mel Fisher to say, today's the day. I can't imagine what it would have looked like to have to say, tomorrow's the day after a day like that. But it was his son's dream too. And he had invested his life with the people he loved into doing something that the average person was unwilling to do. And so he kept going. Within a few days, they started finding millions and millions of dollars from other treasures. There was another ship that had sank called the Santa Margarita. And they started realizing that things were happening. They were in a spot where things started to come together. And at that point, he had everybody from his team but one had quit. Everybody from his team but one had quit. I just want to, maybe you're a coach here. Maybe you're somebody who's in the business of keto. And all of a sudden, he had everybody walk away and they started saying things like, well, this long in, I thought something would work. before the millions started coming in. And the last guy that was left took off with multi-million dollars worth of treasure and tried to run from him. A couple days later, they found out Mel had terminal cancer. Today's the day! I mean, how do you say that at this point? This is one of those stories that at this point in the movie you're going, fake! Fake! Too much! You're getting silly now. It's 119 minutes into this movie. You can't just let the hero win at the end. But the truth is, heroes only are heroes if they finish strong, if they finish well. It's only a good story at the end if you're able to say, I came out the other side. And that's kind of the point that he got to here. Taking a look at what this man was willing to do and what he was willing to lose blows my mind. But he wasn't searching for something that has near the impact what we're searching for in the treasures of our lives. If you have something sunk at the bottom of the ocean in your life that you realize is worth finding, but you've never seen it before, you don't really know what that's going to look like, you don't really understand the impact, well, the ripple effect of that, of going out on those tides, is so much greater than some trinkets and some gold coins. What it's going to do in the lives of your kids and your grandkids and the people that are watching you in silence is far greater than something that's going to sit in a museum for 25 years. And so he kind of takes a look at that and he says, all right, we're going back out. This is it. It's got to come. We've got to get to that point. Then our ship is coming in. He says, today's the day. Today's the day. And he gets back out on the waves, and they said that he was ferocious, that he was almost terrifying. He was so excited and worked up, they scared him a little bit, but he knew it was coming. He knew he was on the brink of something. And he took those boats and he got them back out in the water. A ship is safe in the water, but it wasn't made for the harbor. You've got to get out on those waves. You've got to be willing to do battle with whatever's holding you back. You've got to fight the tides. And he was willing to go out and do that. Broke. His son died. Terminal illness. All the things that you could possibly have in a story that gives a person a reason to quit was the reason he couldn't. He had to stop stopping and start starting and say, this is it. This is the end all be all. And he went back out. Today's the day. 17 years. 17 years! You think some of you have a hard time doing this for 6 months? 17 years! Today's the day! 17 years, July 20th, 1985. He gets a call, and they said, put the charts away. We've hit the muddle load. 1985, they go down, and they start pulling out $400 million worth of treasure off the Nostra Senora de Atocha. It's still on the hull. The silver bars are still stacked 20 feet by 4 feet high. There's chains and swords. They've got 300,000 contraband Colombian emeralds the size of golf balls that weren't even on the manifest. They start finding food that's still good, jarred and saved. 230,000 silver coins. If those were pennies, we're talking about $2,300. Silver coins. Thousands and thousands and thousands of jewels that they don't even know where they came from. They're still researching where they think he may have found them. $400 million of treasure. 19 years later, they were still pulling it up each and every day. The cannons, the armor, the swords, all the things. And for 20 years, they pulled this treasure out from the ocean floor. And it sits in Key West, Florida, in a little museum with a little placard above the door that says, today's the day. And there's a whole lot of people that probably walk in there and go, that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool little sign. They probably didn't walk away shifting their paradigm about the world the way I did. But his story changed my story. His story allowed me to believe I could rewrite what I was doing, that it was worth doing the hard things. And I think about what we're doing here in this community. Why would I share that here? Why would I share that here at a conference that's meant for health and nutrition and carbs and macros? Because I believe that each and every person that showed up here had to say that today's the day one. And it was probably one of the hardest things they've ever done. And there are people here that said that day one, but day 46 was harder to say today's the day. That even though they've been doing it for years, day 1042 was the hardest to say today's the day, and they did it anyway. And even if you don't feel like you're out on your boat right now, even if you feel like you're in one of those seasons where you're getting the dog meat kicked out of you and you think there couldn't possibly keep getting stuff thrown at me, and then something else does, you keep showing up and saying today's the day. There is not a single person in this room that didn't have to go through something to show up here. There is not a single person that your journey to this room was easy. That all the things, if we sat down and we shared all the things we had to go through in our health journey and put them in a basket, wrote them down, put it in a basket and passed it around, within minutes you'd start throwing up in the air and say, I want mine back. Give me back my own story. I don't know if I can do this one, but someone in this room has. Today's the day. Woo! And I think that that's the game changer in this lifestyle for me. That's what I fell in love with in this world as I started finding people whose stories shook me. Now, it wasn't, as much as I love y'all, it wasn't their A1Cs. It wasn't the number on the scale. It wasn't the amount of weight lost. It wasn't the gene size they ended up in. Those are the facts, but that's not the story. And I think that that's what we have here, is we have a group of people who are going and willing to invest in getting the best story they can for their own health. Getting the best story they can, rewriting the identity of who they've always been, chasing down a version of themselves that makes them uncomfortable right now because they know it's worthwhile in the future. They might not be there yet. You might not be sitting on your treasure ship yet, but you're out on the water. And I kind of got to show up this weekend to tell you, you're going to know everything you need to know by the end of this weekend. You're not going to have an excuse under the sun of the facts of how this works. You're going to understand that phenomenal presentation. You're going to be able to calculate your macros tomorrow morning, and you might not have been able to yesterday morning. That's pretty cool. It gets pretty neat that we're able to come here, soak in, take in, integrate information that's going to change our journey. But what I want you to understand is you're going to change your story. You're going to change the person you are, the person you're going to have to become, the things you're going to have to do, the things you're going to go up against, the tides that right now sound too scary. You're preparing yourself for today. If Mel had been given everything he was given in the form of the blocks and the barriers day one, he would have quit. He had to take a mile, see a mile, step a mile, see a mile. He had to go a little bit further, so he was prepared, so he was becoming the person he had to be to do battle with whatever it was that was going to hold him back. Every single person in this room, whether you're a nutritionist, a doctor, if you have letters or anything else, a therapist, I was looking at the lineup. The lineup's crazy, y'all. I don't know how these two women put together what they put together for 200 of us. I can't wrap my head around it. It's insane, the level of people that are showing up that are going to help you change the facts of how you do it. That give you the ability to do it well. That you can finish strong. That you can do things when it's hard. That you understand the things that you can fall back on, the tools you can pull out of your tool belt when it's time. But I think that the underlying part that I get to be here for is to tell you, you get to become someone different. I think if I had been told that 4 years ago, that may have scared me a little bit. I think it would have wigged me out a little bit to know that I was going to have to be the person who could take the hits when the hits came, because they were coming. And if you're in a perfect journey right now, bless you. If you're doing it all right, it's all good all day, every day, and you just got it figured out and you're not experiencing any losses, we're here for you, because it's coming. Nobody's going to do this perfectly. Not a single person who you're going to see on this stage did it without having their boats sink, without having to rebuild the treasure and find it on the ocean floor all over again, without having to lose the ones that they love, without having to be called a fool and an idiot and a charlatan and a fake. There is not a single person who's going to grace this stage who doesn't have a Mel Fisher story, but they're here to share the treasure map. You don't have to go out on the waves the way somebody did 10 years ago. I'm thinking of the Dr. Ken Berries and the Dr. Boz and Abby from House of Keto, the hits that they were willing to take, the waves they were willing to overcome so that you could have a treasure map in your hand this weekend. That's what they were out doing. They were doing battle with whatever it was that was holding them back so you could have it in a little PDF form on their website. You don't think there's value in understanding what it is that they have? There's people that are questioning whether or not we pay these keto coaches for their value. They have 10 years of they're getting from the people who are willing to share their hearts and their souls and the facts in a perfect and easy presentation, you don't see that they had to leave the harbor. And I think about it sometimes when I'm thinking about getting my boat on the water. There are days that I remember listening to that story and going, gosh, Mel, find the treasure. Please find the treasure. I need you to find the treasure. I am too invested in this story, and it's not pretty right now. And I know you look at some of your clients and some of your friends and some of the people that get in your DMs and ask how you're doing it, and you're begging them to go find the treasure. And you believe that they're going to go out there and search, and they're not all like you. And that's hard. It's heartbreaking. It's hard to know that there's treasure deep within them. There's things that they want to find. There's experiences they want to have. There's enjoyment that they deserve in their body, and you see the other side of it. You know what this could look like if they just keep going out on the water and they're leaving their ship safe in the harbor. You know ships weren't made for the harbor. That's why you're here. Every single person who showed up was willing to invest in the future version of themselves, not today's. That's the answer you give your spouse who doesn't get it. That's the answer you give your in-laws who are watching your kids right now, who don't understand why you just traveled to one of the most beautiful states in the country where the sun is shining to sit in a conference room all weekend. You're here for your treasure map. Today's the day for each and every one of you. This weekend's the weekend for each and every person who is willing to show up. But I want you to give credit where credit is due. To the treasure hunters. I want you to give credit to where credit is due to the people who have been sharing for 5 years on YouTube, for the people who have had 10 years of experiences and research, for the doctors who are willing to lose it all, including the letters behind their name for a minute, in order to make sure that you knew that food could be freedom and it wasn't your enemy. So that's my part. That's the reason I got to share on this stage. That's the reason I got to show up in Florida, leave my 5 beautiful babies, who I love so much, 9 and under, y'all, 5 of them, and come down here with my spouse, because I believe that there's a whole bunch of people out there who are rewriting their stories. And I want to empower you to do so. I want to empower you to share. I want to remind you that it's worth telling the details and the facts and the hard moments and the sink shipping moments that happen in this journey, because there's somebody watching. There's somebody out there who still has a pilot light with a little bit of a flame, who doesn't know if it's worth it yet. There's somebody out there right now watching you and your story saying, please find the treasure, Ebony! Please! I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can believe in my story if you don't go finish strong in yours. I need a hero's journey, and I need it to end well. I think that you don't have to have influence or numbers or recognition or respect to change the lives of average people. I think that the average American, I'm going to say this, I can say this in Florida, right? I can say all this in Florida. The average American in this country is hopeless. They're searching. They need something more than what they have right now. There's a whole lot of people, every single state in our country is now over 50% obesity for adults. Over 50%. The average American is wanting something better. The average American knows that there's treasure in them that they don't know how to get to. They're lacking the map, and they don't know if it's worth buying the boat yet. They need your story. Whether you share it on any platform, whether or not you get YouTube famous, whether or not you ever do this out loud, there's someone watching you on your journey who's saying, find that treasure. Not for you, but for them. And what I have learned through 15 years in the industry that I'm in is that leadership is service. It's service first. Whether or not you know it, you're the elite of the keto community. You're the leaders of this community. You're the ones that are leading from the front, and there's a whole bunch of people who you need to serve by getting a really good story, by finding your treasure, by sharing the moments that you start bringing all that up from the hall in the next 20 years of treasure after treasure after treasure. One of my very favorite parts of that story is Jimmy Buffett was there that day. Guys, if you know me, if you watch my reels or anything, you know I love Jimmy Buffett. I grew up on Jimmy Buffett. My dad wears a whole lot of Tommy Bahama t-shirts. I grew up on Jimmy Buffett. He was there that day shooting the album cover for his treasure album, Margaritaville. The thing that would launch his ship for years and years and years to come. He was out there, and he was on the island of Marquesa, and him and Mel Fisher were friends. And Mel called Jimmy Buffett and said, "Man, you wouldn't believe this. We found it. The ship's there." And he took his boat out, and he sat on a stack of that treasure. It was the first time he'd ever publicly say Margaritaville. And he sat there with Mel Fisher on, and they have pictures of him on these big stacks of these silver bars. And it's incredible that Mel's story overlapped with the next person's treasure find. And I think that that's what we have to remind ourselves in the days that we say, I don't know if it's worth it today. I don't know if I'm going to go on the water today. I don't know if today is the day for me. It might not be. But you saying today's the day over and over and over again, consistently in your own story, might lead somebody else to get mad on that water, to fight the waves, to going up against the tides, to do battle with the things that are holding them in place, and they need you to win. And so I just want to speak to the people this weekend, the stories this weekend, because that's all I am, remember? I'm just a wife and a mom who over the course of 4 years had to do keto twice, had to lose the 125 pounds, had to go through the struggles and the pain and the loneliness of doing it all alone, of thinking I was the only one who was crazy enough to do this when everybody else was drinking all day in COVID. I was like, I gotta eat healthy. It was a whole thing. I had a husband and a bunch of kids who ate completely differently than me for 2.5 years. I cooked 2 meals. We homeschool our kids. That's an important part. It's homeschool our kids, all 5 of them. That means mama makes 3 square meals a day and has for a decade. So I got to make 6 square meals a day for 2.5 years until my husband said, I want to join you in this. My ship's on the water. Until my kids started finding treasure and losing sugar from their diets and being able to get low carb, being able to make those swaps and have them not know the difference, but they knew that mama was climbing that mountain with them today. They knew that mama was going parasailing, that she could ride the roller coaster now. She wasn't going to get to the front of the line and be told that she couldn't fit. They had to be able to buckle. I'm so sorry, ma'am. Someone else ride with your kids today. I had to change my story. I had to rewrite my identity to impact the lives of just my little family. And if that was it, that would be enough. If they're the only ones who ever knew, if they're the only ones who ever saw, if they're the only ones that were ever there to cheer me on in the victorious moments, that would have been enough. There's someone in your home. There's someone in your circle. There's someone in your friends group. And if that was the only one, that would be enough. Go find your treasure. Thank you so much.